Okay. Hello guys, today we're gonna go over 4.1, which is pretty much data collection, samples, surveys. Very theoretical, we're gonna go quickly. Again, population, census, and sample. We saw that in chapter 1, there's no need to go over that. I'm gonna go over the most important definitions and the newest ones. Sample survey, again, done in chapter 1, no need to go over that. Convenient sample. It's just a sample that is handy. You have people close to you, people who are readily accessible. When you do a convenient sample, you just, do it quickly. Again, selecting a sample is incredibly important. Selecting a representative sample is incredibly important when you're going to try to find the truth. But sometimes you don't have time, you don't have the resources, you just need some information fast. That's when a convenient sample comes in. Now note, just because it's a convenient sample doesn't mean it's going to give you a biased or it doesn't necessarily disqualify just because it's convenient. But try to not do convenient samples when possible. Try to really take your time to select a representative sample. We're going to go over what that means later on as well, I believe. Don't say bias. Pretty much, if you're the actual definition of the book is the following: the design of a statistical study shows bias. It is if it is very likely to underestimate or very likely to overestimate the value you want to know. So yeah, selecting certain people to answer certain questions. There are certain populations at risk when you're taking samples and surveys. You have to just be careful. Overall, I think it's impossible to have an unbiased research paper, totally unbiased. But there are many, many, many steps you can do to reduce the bias to turn it to be almost insignificant. But it is, it is truly impossible to get to just eliminate bias. But you can reduce it to very acceptable levels very easily with certain just basic steps. All right. Another type of sampling is voluntary response sampling. You just say, hey, who would like to fill in this survey? Like, when you guys did your projects and you posted in Reddit, who would like to fill this in? People volunteer. That's volunteer response sampling. Now, again, it's more or less convenient. People volunteer at their will. They're not pressured into answering. And since they're giving their time to answer your survey, you would assume they are interested in the subject and they are very likely to tell the truth. But note that, there is a lot of bias in this type of sample because, if you post in Reddit, you might not get many elderly folks who don't even know what Reddit is. Or you might get, heavy Reddit users, but you didn't post in Twitter, so you're missing out on the Twitter crowd. So just know that volunteer surveys are really good, but you have to make sure you reach out to different areas, different types of people, different backgrounds, different ways to communicate to these people who are going to be answering your survey. Next, we have random sampling, which is pretty much you have a population, you select people at random. This can reduce investigator bias because, again, I'm not choosing people. I'm not choosing the skinniest people to see whether my weight drug pill worked or not. Or I'm not choosing my friends to see whether I'm a good teacher or a good father or something. I'm choosing random people. But again, within that randomness, many people could be excluded by pure chance. So again, it might give you somewhat skewed result. If you have a population in school and you're going to randomly select 10 people and all 10 are teachers or all 10 are students or all 10 are kindergartners, you're going to get very different responses based on the same question. So just because it's random doesn't mean it's good. Again, it's going to help you avoid certain biases, but it's not good in itself. So you have to be very careful with random sampling. A simple random sample, as stated in the book, is chosen in a way that every group of n individuals in the population has an equal chance to be selected in the sample. So let's say you have 10 groups and each group is, 10 people. You select one person from each group. That's a simple random sample. It's similar to the stratum. It's like a mix between the cluster sampling And stratified sampling, we saw that in 10th grade, we will see it again here. But simple, just you have different groups within your population and you have X amounts per group. And each one of those, each individual in that group has the exact same chance of being selected. That's simple random sample and pretty straightforward. Next, we have what's starting to, I think, be more important when you're doing surveys. We have strata, and stratified random sample. Strata are a group of individuals in a population who shares characteristics thought to be associated with the variables being measured in the study. So let's say, for example, food preference or daily spending money. Everybody in school, even if they don't eat at school, everybody at school has daily spending money. Pero what the good thing about, let's go over the definition. So again, strata is just, let's say, for example, spending money. Everybody in school has a daily spending limit. Gas, food, whatever. Just you have your daily spending money and you can apply that. Now, when you look at stratified random sampling, what it says is it selects a sample by choosing a SRS, which is what we went over, a simple random sample, from each stratum and combining all of these into an overall sample. So let's say, for example, instead of just taking an SRS, which is a simple random sample of the entire school of 10 people, again, you might end up with 10 kindergartners and they say, oh, we have no spending money. I bring my lunchbox. I don't even know what money is. What is money? I want a cupcake. Don't say, they don't even have a concept of money. Whereas if you ask teachers, they might have more spending money than a regular student in most cases. But what you do when you have a stratified sample is you take parts from more or less different strata. We can go, for example, teachers. We can go high schoolers. We can go middle schoolers. We can go elementary school. We can go preschool. And I can select 4 from each randomly. So again, we're combining the simple randomized sample with different strata. And that gives me a more representative, more or less group of your population. But there's also a problem here. Let's say I take 5 teachers and I'm gonna do a strata, teachers, high school students, and elementary school students. I'm gonna survey 10 of each, 10 teachers, 10 high school students, 10 elementary school students. And we're gonna talk about how much spending money we have so we can apply that to the school cafeteria and the school library. In this case, even though we are represented based on probably average spending money, we are not proportionally expressed or represented in this sample because there are tons of more students than teachers. When you combine elementary school students and high school students, it's probably 15 to 1, maybe 10 to 1, 17 to 1, I really don't know. But you guys outnumber us by a lot. So just because it's a stratified sample, again, doesn't mean it's a good representative sample. It's better than a simple randomized sample, but it's not perfect. So yeah, we have everybody more or less represented, but they might not be proportionally represented. And that's also very important when you're trying to reach the truth, okay? But keep in mind that it is very useful to get more or less a broad idea of more or less what's happening everywhere. Now, cluster and cluster sampling is groups, but not based on, for example, age groups or grades or classes. It's just people who are together in one spot. Let's say, for example, I take the 4th floor in school. I'm going to sample everybody. That's the cluster. The 4th floor. I don't care if there are kindergartners up there visiting their brothers or sisters. I don't care if there are teachers. I don't care if there are students. I don't care if there are parents. Everybody who is in the location of the 4th floor gets surveyed. Maybe I can go to the parking lot. Maybe I can go to the cafeteria. So again, you're not basing your group breakdowns based on different strata or levels of the group, just locations. 1st floor, 2nd floor, 3rd floor, 1st floor, parking lot, cafeteria, entry, basketball court 1, basketball court 2. You don't care who's there. You don't care what age they are. You don't care what group they belong to. They're in that location, they get sampled. And again, you can probably start seeing that this has benefits because, okay, I take a random sample from, let's say, the cafeteria, I might get a proportionally representative sample, but I might be missing people. Maybe there are no teachers in that moment, and then you don't survey any teachers. Maybe, maybe there's more teachers in that particular time than students, so maybe you might still get a misrepresentative sample, but again, it's very useful, very useful. Sometimes a cluster sample is the same thing as a convenience sample. I'm going to sample everybody in my room. My room is a cluster, and it is also convenient because it is close by, it is accessible, it is easy to reach. So note that some of these definitions can satisfy different criteria. So cluster is just breakdowns based on location. That's pretty much it. Under coverage, when some members of the population are less likely to be chosen or cannot be chosen in a sample. If you do a voluntary sample and you're going to use Discord and you're going to have people volunteer over Discord, guess how many 50, 60, 70, and 80-year-old people you're going to get to volunteer without their grandson or somebody else helping them? I know how many. 0, pretty much. Because you ask any 50s, well, not any, most 50, 60, 70-year-olds, you ask them what Discord is, and they're going to just give you the actual definition of the word. People fighting, chaos, whatever. They don't know what Discord is. Twitter. So you have to be very careful with the medium that you choose to try to sample people, because one way or the other, there will be undercoverage. Again, okay, I'm not going to use Twitter. I'm going to use newspapers. Well, now you're not going to be able to properly survey young people. Okay, I'm going to use TV. Well, now you're going to underrepresent people who don't use TVs. There are some people who just, don't watch cable anymore. They use YouTube and the net. Okay, well, now I'm going to survey people, via YouTube. But I don't watch YouTube. I watch Twitch. Okay, so there are always going to be people underrepresented. But again, you have to try to cover all your bases as much as possible. That's why I said that bias can be reduced considerably, but it can never be eliminated. There is no way to completely eliminate bias, but you can reduce it to very acceptable working levels. Non-response occurs when an individual chosen for the sample can't be contacted or refuses to participate. We see this a lot in medicine. People move, people die. So, that's people change their minds, people move away, people change their phones, people change their emails, people forget to check their emails. So pretty much when you start contacting somebody and they don't respond back, that's called a non-response. And I'm not sure if we're going to see this here in this book, but there are ways you can evaluate how good the survey was based on the number of people that answered, responded back, how many people died, how many people moved, how many people chose to continue the survey, etc., etc. Haven't seen it yet, but we never know. Response bias, another definition. Response bias occurs when there is a systematic pattern of inaccurate answers to a survey question. We had some very spicy projects related certain political activities in the US, political groups, elections. So based on how fervent a group is on answering a survey, you can just have a group that is all over answering your survey because they want to answer your questions. And that, even though you want people to be happy to answer your questions, if you only get one group incredibly happy about answering your questions and nobody else answers your questions, that's response bias. Again, oh my God, look, teacher, I got 500 people to respond. Yeah, but they were all from one side of the problem, not the other. So yeah, that's great. You got 500 people from one side, but we need people from the other side as well to get an actual representation of the truth. Again, you can start seeing how it's impossible to eliminate bias. That's pretty much it for 4.1. Just really interesting definitions. I really love these theoretical chapters because we learn a lot. Please go over, even though I went over the definitions, go over the word problems carefully. Know when there is a biased question, when there is a biased response. Try to go over the different sampling methods, see which ones are good for certain situations, and selecting the proper sample is like step 2 or 3, because again, you have to do a couple of things before that. But selecting a proper sample and sampling properly is probably the second most important part of a research project, besides actually creating and formulating the research questions, which you need. Because again, if you sample properly, all those excellent tools, all those excellent questions you had, all these excellent things you've learned will not reach a proper conclusion, because the answers you got were not the most representative answers. So again, do your best sampling. Try to really get a representative sample. Hopefully in the book we're going to go over that later. If not, I'm going to take some time apart to go over what a representative sample means, and it's based on the population. It's based on a multitude of factors. There are some careers that all they do is just calculate representative samples using extremely complex formulas, which I just saw a couple of simple ones and I freaked out. There's no way we can do that. But theoretically, you can get a good grasp on what a good or representative sample is. So that's it for 4.1. Have a great day. I will see you soon.